All right, today we are unpacking something truly monumental. We're looking at an explainer that acts as a map, one connecting massive, sweeping astrological timelines straight into a highly actionable, highly profitable tech investment framework. We're talking about the years 2020 to 2032, not just as a random period of history, but as a holistic, geocosmic reconfiguration of the global order, at least according to the source material. We're going to see exactly how macroplanetary alignments are theorized to map perfectly onto the most critical technological shifts of our time, pointing us right toward the specific companies that will define the next decade.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for the journey. We'll cover the 2020 Great Reset, the incoming 2026 Flashpoint, and the Era of Reconstruction. Then we'll break down the specific tech targets anchoring this transition: NVIDIA, Google, and SpaceX.
Section 1. The 2020 Great Reset, the breakdown of hierarchical order. To really grasp where we're headed, we actually have to look back at the breakdown of the hierarchical order we've all lived under since the 80s. According to the source framework, this whole timeline kicks off in 2020. This was marked by a massive Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Capricorn. In mundane astrology, this doesn't just suggest a little change. The theory states it literally demands the forced deconstruction of our institutional foundations. It's not a series of random isolated crises, It's a painful, holistic rebirth. From that 2020 reset, which seriously eroded public trust in centralized authority, we are now barreling straight into the 2025 to 2026 great turning point. After that, the storm finally starts to clear as we enter the era of reconstruction from 2027 to 2032, ending in a totally new systemic stabilization. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how starkly these two paradigms contrast. I mean, think about it. The old world was built entirely on pyramidal, top-down socioeconomic models. It relied 100% on centralized trust and authority. But as we've all seen, that trust is rapidly eroding. So what's the proposed replacement? Well, it's the new world, a world defined by networked models, blockchain, DeFi, and just the full absolute integration of artificial intelligence into every single layer of society. The analysis suggests a massive pivot. We're shifting away from fallible human institutions and moving toward algorithm-based transparency. Section 2, the 2026 Flashpoint: Extreme Turbulence and Systemic Shocks. The source material flags this 2025 to 2026 window as the absolute highest phase of geocosmic intensity we've seen in decades. This is where the theoretical reset we just talked about turns into a direct, highly volatile confrontation between the old world and the new. A major trigger hits right on February 20th, 2026. This date brings a Neptune-Saturn conjunction at the highly sensitive 0-degree Aries mark, also known as the world axis. Hitting this cardinal degree is a big deal. It makes this conjunction the catalyst for a brand new 36-year cycle. It's framed as a moment of extreme duality. We're going to see the painful breakdown of long-standing global economic illusions happening at the exact same time that these visionary, decentralized ideas actually start to materialize. But the real climax, that hits just a few months later. July 2026 is explicitly described as the fiery peak. We get a Mars-Uranus conjunction sitting dead opposite Jupiter and Pluto. It forms this incredibly tense T-square configuration. This is the explosive epicenter of change. The analysis projects sudden, severe, systemic shocks and massive, completely unpredictable technological breakthroughs. According to the framework, July 2026 is the factual transformation moment where the old world permanently, absolutely loses its grip on control. Section 3, Era of Reconstruction, 2027 to 2032. As that intense planetary wave finally begins to settle down after the fiery peak, humanity basically rolls up its sleeves and starts rebuilding. We shift out of the chaotic turbulence and step into a highly visionary phase. The source explicitly defines the astrological backbone for this entire rebuilding phase as Uranus in Gemini, an alignment that lasts all the way until May 2033. Now, Gemini rules information, trade, and currency exchange. Uranus, that's the planetary engine of decentralization and radical, sweeping innovation. You put those two together, and the framework suggests you get the absolute perfect cosmic environment for the final establishment of blockchain, DeFi, and an explosive, unstoppable boom in artificial intelligence. Let's move to and see how this builds into concrete reality. It really happens in 3 distinct steps. Step 1, theoretical models. This is Uranus in Gemini generating all these radical, disruptive ideas. Step 2 hits in 2028 with a Mars-Sun conjunction in Aries, which is a sign of pure action. The framework points to this specific moment as the time when all those theoretical tech models from the previous years rapidly solidify into actual physical state structures. And finally, step 3 is the systemic plateau in 2032. That's when these crazy new technological paradigms just become the totally normalized standard of everyday life.
So, having mapped out this incredible geocosmic timeline, we have to ask a highly practical question. How on earth do we actually position ourselves for this new world? This is where we pivot the narrative of this explainer. We're shifting away from macroastrology straight into a micro-investment strategy. Look, if the old institutional structures are genuinely collapsing, the thesis argues we need a technological lifeboat. We need to actively invest in the companies that directly embody the traits of Uranus and Gemini, meaning decentralization, AI, and complete information dominance.
Section 4, NVIDIA, the hardware backbone powering the AI revolution. So the crucial point is we need to talk about the undisputed king of the hardware required for this whole new global economy.
The framework identifies NVIDIA as the ultimate physical foundation of this new era, assigning them a massive 40% portfolio allocation. They absolutely dominate GPUs for AI training and agentic AI. But, to ensure hardware decentralization and real compute competition, the strategy also demands a 25% allocation in AMD. Together, as we cross that 2026 Flashpoint, we're expecting an unprecedented surge in AI infrastructure, specifically the build-out of huge AI factories and systems like Vera Rubin. Basically, NVIDIA and AMD perfectly answer the astrological demand for explosive compute power dictated by Uranus and Gemini. They are literally the physical engines driving global GDP forward.
Section 5, Google, information dominance, algorithms, and global reach.
If hardware is the physical backbone, then Google provides the software and information dominance perfectly tailored for this Gemini-ruled era of communications. This earns them a solid 20% allocation in the strategy. Astrologically, Gemini is all about data, media, and connectivity, right? Well, Google boasts deep AI integration across its own Gemini models, its cloud infrastructure, and the massive Android ecosystem. Because this new world relies on algorithmic transparency instead of old centralized authority, Google's mastery over data gives it unparalleled global reach. In fact, the source argues their ecosystem and custom TPU chips will be absolutely fundamental to daily survival and commerce in the coming decade.
Section 6, SpaceX, decentralized network bypassing traditional infrastructure.
Okay, so we have the hardware and we have the software. But to connect all this intelligence globally, completely independent of old government structures, the framework assigns a final 15% allocation to SpaceX. Just look at what Starlink actually achieves. It provides a global, satellite-based internet connectivity that literally bypasses traditional earthbound telecom infrastructure. This is a game changer that directly supports the shift from those old pyramidal structures to networked models of the economy. When we talk about that 2028 physical realization of new systems, SpaceX physically embodies it. They ensure seamless connectivity and global data transfer, even in remote areas or crisis zones that might be heavily affected by the 2026 turbulence.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core investment thesis for the era of Reconstruction. We have our AI hardware backbone, right, led by a 40% stake in NVIDIA and supported by a 25% stake in AMD to ensure that necessary compute competition. Next, we have a 20% allocation in Google for absolute information dominance, though you do have to navigate the key risk of antitrust regulations there. And finally, a 15% stake in SpaceX, acting as our decentralized infrastructure. The main risk with SpaceX, of course, is the lack of direct public exposure at the moment. But together, they form a unified, highly strategic portfolio mapped directly onto our astrological timeline.
So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. The geocosmic clock is literally ticking. The Saturn-Pluto reset of 2020 already cracked the foundations of the old world. The Neptune-Saturn conjunction and that fiery peak of 2026, they are fast approaching. The turbulence is framed as totally inevitable, sure, but so is the profound, world-changing technological rebirth that follows. So the question you have to ask yourself right now is this: will you let yourself be crushed by the fear of the 2026 collapse? Or will you use this map to actively invest in the decentralized, AI-driven reconstruction of tomorrow?